Hello, and welcome to the practice warm-up follow-along video. Hopefully you've had a little look at whichever other videos are relevant to you. This warm-up follow-along is the same for everybody, but I'll differentiate a couple of the exercises in the future. The whole sort of stretching and self-massage warm-up is the same for everyone, and it's good and important, and please don't skip it. Firstly, we're going to do a big stretch because tension is very much the enemy of good vocal technique for absolutely every voice type, but particularly for those of us who are trying to lift or lower our pitch or make any adjustments, it's important that we're using all of these muscles in a sort of relaxed and healthy, productive way. The little stretch and self-massage warm-up is also great because one of the biggest challenges of voice work is feeling everything that's going on and gaining conscious control of all those little muscles. So we have senses called proprioception and interoception, and basically it's knowing where my hand is without looking at it, that kind of body awareness sense. It's a challenge for absolutely everybody with voice work because usually when we speak, we're just thinking about what we're saying rather than how we're saying it. So just awareness of all of these muscles takes a little bit of time. Those two senses statistically are a bit of a challenge for trans folk generally. Perhaps unsurprisingly, a lot of us mentally check out of our bodies a little bit as a way of coping and getting on with our lives. A lot of us like to just think of ourselves as a brain in a jar, which is fine and totally relatable, but we do, at least from the shoulders up, need to take a moment to check into the muscles that we're going to be using. Proprioception and interoception are also statistically likely to be tricky for those who are autistic. And as you may know, there's a big crossover between the autistic community and the trans community. So if either or both apply to you, please absolutely do this little warm-up. So the first thing we're going to do is just some tiny little baby shoulder rolls. Give your shoulders a minute to get used to that. And when it feels like it's okay, help yourself to some nice big generous ones. Go any speed you like, any direction you like. You can do them together or separately, or just having a little check-in to our shoulders, making sure they're nice and relaxed, feeling any stretchiness or crunchiness that's happening in there. We're also going to shrug our shoulders up to our ears and squeeze them up there and keep them for a second. Keep them until it's a little bit uncomfortable, but not painful, and then just let them drop. And you're going to do your best to leave your shoulders in this nice, relaxed drop-down position. We're also going to do just a little neck stretch. So tip your ear over to your shoulder, just gently. Stay there for a moment. Take a breath. Feel these muscles stretching. Notice where you feel the stretch start and how far down it goes. And we're going to very gently and slowly roll ourselves down so our nose goes towards our armpit. Take a moment there. Feel what that's stretching in the sort of back side of your neck. And keep going around until your chin comes down to your chest. Take a moment there. Feel the back of your neck kind of stretching and opening up. There are 7 vertebrae in the back of your neck from the top of your spine to the base of your skull. See if you can imagine a tiny little bit of space opening up in between each one. And we're going to keep rolling around so our nose comes to our other armpit. Take a moment to feel that stretch there. And when you're ready, slowly roll up and around so that that ear is to that shoulder. So we've made a full little semicircle. Take a moment here, again, to feel that stretch. Notice where it starts and where it stops. And bring your head back up to the middle. Broadly, I recommend only stretching sort of forward with your neck. If you know it's fine and good for your neck to stretch it back, go ahead. But if you have a bad neck, that's a great way to strain it. So I will leave that up to your discretion. We're also going to give ourselves a little bit of a neck rub. So have a nice little squeeze of all of these muscles back here. If anything feels a bit tight or a bit sore or a bit bumpy, give it an extra little squeeze. Take your time. We all definitely deserve a little neck rub. If nothing feels tight or sore or bumpy, congratulations. Take a moment to make a little mental map of everything you can feel back there. Feel free to pause and have a longer neck rub. When you're ready, bring your hands forward and we're going to give our jaw a little squeeze as well, just gently with this muscle. So I'm rubbing on the side right where it moves. right there. These muscles are really easy to clench without noticing, so take a moment to just check into them. And if you feel like you've got a little bit of tension there, just gently give them a rub. Remind those muscles they can chill out. Your mouth isn't going to fall off. Everything's fine. For our jaw, we're also going to do a slightly silly exercise. I'm going to demonstrate first. I'm going to look ridiculous, but I warmly recommend doing it along with me. First, you're going to clasp your hands up in front of your face. You're going to let your jaw kind of hang, and you're going to shake your hands and make a sound like this. See, I did look ridiculous, but it's a really great way to double check if your jaw is held and to let it kind of flop around and be nice and relaxed. We're also going to give the base of our tongue a little squeeze. So thumbs behind your chin, but still in front of your neck, just gently. Have a little squish under there. See what you can feel. This little bit down here is the base of your tongue. So your tongue comes down pretty far, actually. I think further down than we mostly tend to visualize. You can feel it moving if you want by just pressing a thumb gently up there and swallowing, and you'll feel your tongue doing that ripply movement that helps us swallow. It's nice to just quickly check in with the base of our tongue, firstly so that we remember where it is, but secondly because it's really easy to clench that a little bit too much, and we really want to make sure that the base of our tongue is relaxed because the base of our tongue is attached to the top of our larynx where our vocal folds live. And what we really want for good voice technique is for our larynx to move really freely and under its own steam. So it's tempting sometimes to squeeze that base of our tongue to try and pull our voice up, but we definitely want to have it nice and relaxed. To that end, we're also going to do a little tongue stretch. Step number 1, just stick it out. And if that feels fine and good, you can keep it out and gently try to move towards a yawn. You should feel quite a firm pull in the base of your tongue. Firstly, that's a great bit of our tongue to make sure is nice and chilled out and relaxed, and also just to be aware of because, like I said before, we tend not to really think about any of these bits back there. If you watched the Transmask video, we did that little stretch to think about letting our tongue sit low in our mouth. Go ahead and have a few sentences of low tongue dialogue if you'd like. Pause the little video. Checking in with the base of our tongue is really nice and important because it's attached to the top of our larynx. And for good vocal function and technique, we want our larynx to be able to move really freely and unobstructed and of its own accord. So we want to double check that that's nice and relaxed. If you watch the Transmask video, we talked a little bit about keeping that bit relaxed. There's a difference between engaging and clenching a muscle, and it can be kind of hard to feel where that line is sometimes. So giving it a little stretch to begin with often helps us out with that. We're also going to help ourselves to some nice generous yawns. If you can make yourself yawn, great. If you can't, that's also fine. It's mostly important that we make the shape of a yawn with our face. So we're going to start nice and high and kind of slide down in a cowardly lion style yawn. So like this. We're going to do a handful of those. As you do these big slides down, think about all of the space back here opening up. You might also be able to feel your soft palate lift up towards your brain, which is delightful. The soft palate is the squishy bit at the top, at the back of your mouth, where the uvula hangs down. So when we yawn, it naturally lifts up. You can also just find this with a torch and a mirror to look in the back of your own throat. It's the little hangy ball thing, and it does move up and down when you yawn. And you should also be able to do that just by thinking about it. But sometimes that takes a little getting used to. Because when did you last consider your uvula? Probably not for a while. We're going to do 1 or 2 more yawns just to get a really nice warm up in. Try to start each one a little bit higher and come down a little bit smoother. To start with a high note, imagine the note kind of floating up above your head. As you slide down, you might notice a little bit of a gear change between the high bit of your voice and the low bit of your voice. That's totally fine and normal. Every single voice has that, whether you've got a really high voice or a really low voice. That's just that little gear change between what we call your head voice and your chest voice. If that kind of bumpy bit is a little bit hard to navigate, when you're doing these slides down, think about pulling the sound back a little bit behind that. Also, the more you do these slides, the smoother that should get and the more you'll learn how to navigate it properly. broadly, that middle bit of our voice where it can be a little bit tricky is easier to figure out if you start above rather than trying to start below and go up. So if that's something you're working on, do lots of these slides. We're also going to do a few lip trills. A lip trill is when you blow a raspberry like this. If that's tricky for you, sometimes it helps to hold the corners of your mouth down like this so that these muscles don't try to help. If your lips are just not cooperating, that's totally fine too. You can also do a rolled R or even just a V sound. Basically, we want something closing at the front of your mouth. We're going to take this lip trill and we're going to slide up and down like this. You're going to do a whole bunch. It's going to sound a little bit silly, but putting a little bit of resistance at the front of your mouth is a great way to work on range and on crossing that middle bit of your voice. So have a couple more. And you might even want to try bouncing each one a little bit higher. This is a warm-up that singers use a lot as well. So if you're here because you'd like to think about singing voice as well, that's a really good one. Do that lots. The last thing we're going to do before we start using our voice is to just have a tiny little posture check. If you're comfortable doing a stretch sort of below the shoulders, we're going to pick one hand up and gently tip over like this. Take a moment. Feel your ribs kind of opening up. There are muscles between each set of ribs called the intercostal muscles, and they do stretch a little bit if we give them the chance. If you're comfortable doing so, you can even have a little tap here, just to say hello to them. And of course, take a moment to feel those different sides, and then tip over to the other side as well. Take as much or as little time here as is comfortable. Give everything a little bit of a wiggle. If you're someone who loves a stretch, you can get up, touch your toes, have a little moment, and then we'll come back to sitting with our feet on the floor or standing if you're more comfortable standing. And we're just going to take a moment to balance our shoulders on top of our hips. And we're going to bobble our head around and find the point where it balances with the least amount of effort. Like good voice technique, good posture shouldn't feel like loads of work. So we always want to be looking for the most lazy or ergonomic ways to do things. There's no need to work harder than we need to hold our head up or to produce a sound. So take a moment to feel our nice relaxed shoulders from before. All of our shoulders and our head stacked really nicely in a way that is not too much work. And we're going to try and stay here in this nice neutral position as we start using our voice. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to think about singing a note or humming a note if you don't like to sing. And we're going to think about different vowel shapes that our mouth makes. So depending on what videos you've watched, you might have done E-A-A or I as a little introduction to resonance and how much space we're leaving inside our mouths. You can do either one of those. You can also just pick a vowel and see what happens. Maybe you'd like to do a nice O, and then see what happens if you speak with an O sound, or I, and then see what happens if you speak with an I kind of shape in your mouth. To pick the note, I would warmly recommend using a keyboard if you're happy with a keyboard, or a little pitch reading app if that works for you. Not necessarily to try and push our pitch really high or really low, but just as a point of reference, if that makes sense. If we're working down towards the bottom bit of our voice, we might be more comfortable maybe here on a C3. If you've got a sort of mid-range voice, you might be happy here on an E3. If you've got a higher voice or working to push it higher, you might be happy to work here at a G3, just as some examples. Whatever note you pick, it shouldn't feel like lots of work to push your voice up or down to it. So we want a note that's a couple notes higher or a couple notes lower than where you would naturally speak. You should never be working super hard to make a sound happen with your voice. I'm gonna pick the middle note, the E3, and I'm gonna try E-A-A, and I'm gonna say a couple of nice boring sentences with an ah kind of shape to my mouth. And then, just for fun, I'm gonna do the other way as well. I, and I'll say a couple of nice boring sentences with an E kind of shape in my mouth, just to feel what that does to the resonance. Pick one of these or a different vowel if you'd like. Have a little sing or hum of your note. E, and and we're gonna practice a little bit of dialogue using that shape of your mouth. So you'll see some words come up on the bottom of the screen, kind of in answer to my words. You can use those and just read them out, or you can improvise a response to any of these if you'd like that as well. Hi. How have you been? Oh, yeah, me too. Can you tell me a little bit about what kind of day you had today? Hmm. Yeah, very relatable. What do you have planned for your weekend? Is there anything fun coming up for you? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite thing to do on a quiet night at home? Do you have favorite movies, TV shows, books? Tell me all about it. Beautiful. Really nice. Whereabouts in the world do you live? Hmm. Yeah, I bet it's nice there. Do you like to travel? Hmm. Okay, so hopefully you either read out the pre-prepared dialogue or just improvised your own answers. It's nice to kind of improvise once you get the hang of this, because part of the joy and difficulty of voice practice is learning to integrate new habits into your everyday speech when you're busy thinking about what you're trying to say. It can also be really nice to practice this kind of stuff just by reading out a book or doing character voices for maybe a Dungeons and Dragons game, or, as we're going to see in this video, a little puppet show. I'm joined now by trans icon, Blage, and this small unicorn. In a moment, I'm going to put on a little puppet show with these two characters. And what I'd love you to do is either use the dialogue that's down below them on the screen, which should also be in a Word document if that's better for you. And you're going to give each of these puppets a different voice. Here's the thing. Neither of these puppets should have your ideal perfect speaking voice. What we're looking for here is using the skills that we've learned in other videos to make a difference between one voice and the other. So it might be that one character has a higher pitch than the other. Maybe this one speaks with a high sound and this one speaks with a low sound. Maybe we're thinking about resonance. Maybe this one has a really bright sound and maybe this one has a bigger, darker sound. Maybe this one sounds really twangy and maybe this one sounds very open and posh. Whatever you'd like to change about these two voices to make them just sound like different characters. There's no right or wrong answer as long as it doesn't physically hurt. If you like to do accents or anything else like that, this is a great way to practice it. And feel free to loop this around and change as many different things about these voices as you can think of. This is a really great way to practice because if you're giving the voices to a puppet, we don't have to think too hard about whether it's correct or perfect or feels like you. We're just really thinking about our voice as a tool that we can use and as a skill set that we can expand. So this is a little bit silly, but try it anyway. A lot of the easiest voices to work with and to modify are just flexible voices that are played with a lot.